Применяю точечную цензуру строго по правилам, остальной текст не меняю. Several years before everything came to light, the 8 Passengers channel had amassed 2.5 million subscribers. People came for exactly what Ruby Franca called parenting. She and her husband, Kevin, both graduates of Brigham Young University, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, were raising 6 children, doing it publicly, on camera, explaining every decision out loud. A son temporarily lost his room. A daughter wouldn't receive a school lunch she had forgotten to pack herself. Strict, yes, but every step with a rationale, every rule with logic, every consequence framed as a lesson. By June 2020, the channel had reached 1 billion views, and Kevin would later say that at its peak, it was bringing in over $100,000 a month from YouTube alone. On screen, this was a home where everything appeared intentional and consistent, a mother who didn't hide her methods, who explained why, not just what. No one asked what stood behind the camera. Then, on August 30th, 2023, in the small town of Ivins, Utah, a teenager appeared at a neighbor's front door without shoes. His wrists and ankles were bound with tape. Security footage recorded the time, 10:50 in the morning. Visibly underweight, barefoot, he was 250 miles from his home in Springville, and from the first glance it was clear the journey here had not been easy. At first, no one answered. Then a man came to the door, and the teenager spoke calmly. No tears, no panic. He had one request, a ride to the nearest police station. When asked why, he said simply, quote, 0 first responders would later describe his demeanor in a single word: stoic, detached, as though he was turning himself in, not seeking rescue. As it would later emerge, Ruby and Hildebrandt had told him that forgiveness required repentance first, and that repentance meant going to the authorities. He believed this, and that was exactly where he was headed. This had been his second attempt. The first had not succeeded. In August, it finally did. The neighbor called 911. While his wife brought water, the teenager added, quote, one inside the house, Jody Hildebrandt. From that moment, everything that had been happening behind that closed door ceased to be a private matter. Officers entered without a warrant, exigent circumstances. They moved through the entire house before finding what they were looking for. In a dark storage closet near the bathroom, a figure on the floor, sitting cross-legged, head shaved, barely moving. Officer Tobler would later say that in the first moment, they simply didn't understand who they were looking at. She was staring up from the floor in silence. Officers asked questions. She didn't respond. Tobler called Detective Bate, who at that point was still with the teenager outside. Quote 2, quote, she asked. Quote 3, quote, he replied. Quote 4, quote, that was how they knew who they had found. It was Ruby Franca's youngest daughter, the same girl viewers of 8 Passengers had seen on screen hundreds of times, the lively, recognizable face of the channel. For the next 4 hours, officers tried to coax her to stand. One thing worked. Tobler said, "I'd be willing to bet you like pizza." She nodded. They brought pizza and put on music. She didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, she opened the box. 4 hours after she was found, she finally walked out of the closet on her own. While she was being transported to the hospital, Ruby Franca pulled up to the house. Officers detained her immediately. Detective Bate would later note that throughout the entire search, neither Ruby nor Hildebrandt once asked about the condition of the children. Both women were brought to the station. Ruby's interview lasted approximately 3 minutes. Officers offered her water, explained they were there to talk about the children. She said nothing. Around the second minute, she said, "I'll wait for my attorney, that's all." That same day, Kevin Franca arrived at the station on his own, looking for information about his children. At that point, he was being treated as a potential person of interest. Investigators informed him of his son's condition: malnourished, skeletal, barely anything left. There is footage of the moment Kevin hears this. Quote _7 _ he asks. This was not performance. As the investigation would later establish, Kevin had moved out of the family home in July 2022. Ruby had asked him to leave. He had not seen her or the children for more than a year. Not a single piece of evidence implicating him emerged from the case. He was cleared. On September 2, 2023, both women were formally charged with 6 counts of aggravated abuse, a second-degree felony. Their names became known across the country, and immediately, one question hung in the air that would go unanswered for a long time. How was any of this possible? In 2021, the 8 Passengers channel posted a video. Ruby holds the camera in one hand, her arm around her son, announcing to viewers that they'd be celebrating his birthday all week. He smiles broadly on camera. 2 years later, July 2023, the same birthday. In Ruby's journal, an entry, "Today is his day, and he doesn't even know what month it is." What occurred that day was described by Washington County Deputy District Attorney Zachary Weiland. From the morning, he was taken outside barefoot without water, Ivins, Utah, in July. It was extremely hot, Weiland would say, and he stood in that yard the entire day. And here is what matters. This is not a version constructed by investigators. These are entries from Ruby's own journal, found during the search, alongside restraints, rope, and medical bandages. She had been documenting what was happening day by day from May through August 2023 in careful handwriting on unnumbered pages. Not for a courtroom, not for viewers. She had not planned to show anyone. 2 birthdays, one on camera, one in ink. Between them, something had happened to the person holding the camera in both. In the summer of 2020, the channel posted 2 videos that viewers could not ignore. In the first, the eldest son Chad mentioned in passing that he had been sleeping on an air mattress in the basement for 7 months, a punishment for a prank. He had convinced his younger brother they were going to Disneyland. His room was taken away. Ruby would later describe it on camera as __quote _8__. The video was quickly deleted. In the second, Ruby explained to viewers why she had refused to allow a teacher to bring lunch to her forgetful daughter at school. "9, she said on camera. 10, a petition appeared on change.org, direct in its language, citing signs of neglect and calling on Child Protective Services to investigate. CPS received roughly 1,000 reports a day. Inspectors arrived, examined the home, interviewed every family member, and left. No grounds established. Case closed. Ruby gave an interview. Everything taken out of context. The petition gathered 18,000 signatures. The channel continued operating. The system looked and did not see enough. Around that same time, the family sought outside help. Chad had by then been removed from school. An acquaintance recommended a licensed family counselor. Her name was Jody Hildebrandt. Hildebrandt had received her clinical counseling license in Utah in 2003. Within the state's LDS community, she held a particular position. She worked with couples and families, specializing in issues the church considered serious, and the leadership of several congregations referred members to her directly. That license had been suspended for 18 months in 2012. The reason? From 2008 onward, she had repeatedly disclosed confidential client information, including medical diagnoses, to church leadership and the BYU Discipline Office, without consent. One client was directly harmed as a result. The license was reinstated in 2013, and here is the critical detail. Under applicable law, by the time Ruby came to her, the 2012 record was no longer publicly accessible. The program Hildebrandt called Connect Science was built on one idea. People live in distortion, and only through her truth can they be healed. Former client Stephanie Jones described it to NBC News in a single phrase: everything stayed inside. Kevin also joined a Men's Connect Science group to work on the marriage. As would later emerge, 2 years later, Ruby asked him to leave their home. In August 2021, Hildebrandt called in a state Kevin would later describe as complete disorientation. When they arrived at her house, something was happening inside. Loud sounds from empty rooms, strange marks on the windows. Hildebrandt said she was under a spiritual attack. She moved into the Franca home, taking Sherry's room. Shari had by that point already left for college. At night, rituals began. Hildebrandt would enter what Kevin called possessed trances. She would convulse, gasp, speak in unfamiliar voices. Ruby and Kevin took turns placing their hands on her. He later said in the Hulu documentary that he was trying to help Jody through it. His involvement was soon deemed unnecessary. Ruby continued alone and moved her sleeping space into Hildebrandt's room. It was around that time that Chad confessed. He had been watching adult films and kissing girls. Hildebrandt and Ruby declared that he was the source of the spiritual warfare in the house. Chad was removed from the home. Kevin followed and moved out. In the house now, Ruby, Hildebrandt, and the 4 youngest children. Ivins is a resort town near the Red Rock formations of southern Utah. Hildebrandt's home was nearly 10,000 square feet. Outside, a picturesque suburb. Inside, a concrete room in the basement, behind a steel door. Beginning in May 2023, the Washington County Prosecutor's Office would describe what happened in that house as the conditions of a work camp. No beds, no food or water in any normal sense, no books, games, or conversation. The brother and sister were kept separately. They didn't see each other for more than a month, only heard one another through the walls. During the day, labor. Court documents specify carrying heavy boxes up and down stairs for hours, standing against a wall without support for hours, working outside barefoot in the July heat while the concrete surface was scalding. This resulted in severe harm to their feet. When guests came to the house, the children were hidden. From the outside, it appeared to be an ordinary home in a scenic suburb, but by that point, restraints had been added. After the first attempt to leave in July, conditions became more severe. Under the terms of the plea agreement, he was regularly restrained, sometimes with rope, sometimes with restraints, sometimes both. He was placed in a position that left him entirely without recourse. His condition from this treatment worsened steadily. When investigators asked about the tape on his ankles, the tape the neighbor had noticed in the first moments, the teenager said it was for the wounds. That's what he had been told. It helped them heal. He also said that all of it was his own fault. The wounds were treated with a mixture of honey and cayenne pepper. No medical attention was provided. A colleague said quietly, quote, 11. The officer beside him replied, quote, 12. When they discovered he had been secretly drinking water, that became a separate occasion for punishment. His primary place of confinement by that point was the bunker in the basement, a concrete room behind a steel door, with a toilet, a sink, an empty refrigerator, and a fold-down cot. All this time, his sister was in another part of the same house. Her situation was parallel. Hours of exercises against the wall, standing without support, working outside barefoot until her feet bore the marks of what she had endured. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Hildebrandt subjected her to severe physical hardship, leaving her in a state that spoke for itself. Alongside this came another process. The girl was told she was wicked, possessed, unworthy of love, until she repented, truly repented. That the pain was not cruelty, but help, that everything happening to her was being done for her sake. This was said not only by Hildebrandt, it was said by her mother. By August 2023, she had been in isolation long enough that she had stopped responding to unfamiliar people. When officers found her in the closet, she didn't answer a single question and barely moved for 4 hours, until medical personnel finally persuaded her to stand. The Washington County Prosecutor's Office would record in its final summary, the children had been subjected to such a level of emotional manipulation that they had come to believe they deserved what was happening to them. Where did those beliefs originate in the mother? The answer was written in her own hand, in the journal found during the search, along with restraints, rope, and medical bandages. The prosecution submitted it as evidence. CBS News, after receiving the materials in March 2024, described the journal as a meticulously written, page-by-page account of what was happening in the house. This is not a chronicle in any ordinary sense. It is an interpretation. One of the children in the entries is described as satanic, slipping and creeping, watching for the moment when no one is looking. Starvation appears not as deprivation, but as fasting, spiritual discipline, Working on scorching concrete is not punishment, but an opportunity for repentance. Every action receives theological justification. Restraints, isolation, withholding food, all written into a system in which, from the inside, it appears logical. And this is what made the journal so significant for investigators. Ruby was not concealing what she was doing. She was documenting it, as a mother fulfilling her duty. In July 2023, among these entries, one appeared that prosecutors would cite publicly. 5 words. They would become the most quoted document in this case. Ruby opened the journal and wrote the heading, "Big Day for Evil." What followed was a description. She subjected him to extreme physical pressure. And in that moment she speaks, "The devil will tell you I am hurting you, but I am actually saving you." A separate entry, no heading, no date. He asks for food. Ruby writes, "I will not feed a demon." This is not a fragment taken out of context. It is the central logic of the journal, stated plainly. Suffering as evidence of love, resistance as a sign of possession, pain as the path to salvation. Washington County District Attorney Eric Clark, at a press conference in March 2024, addressed these entries directly. Ruby fully believed in what she was doing. She was not pretending, not hiding it from herself. She believed. He added, "That is precisely what makes this case so difficult, not because this woman was cruel, but because she was convinced." The journal contains no mention of where those beliefs came from, who formed them. When exactly the mother who once held a camera and explained her every decision to viewers began to see her own child as a vessel of darkness. After the arrest, people who had stayed silent for years began to speak. Jessie Hildebrandt, Jody's niece, gave an interview in September 2023. She had lived with her aunt under her guardianship. Jessie described being subjected to physical restraints and sensory deprivation, isolated for up to 12 hours a day, made to sleep outside in the snow, and forbidden from closing the door. If anyone spoke to her, she was required to stare forward in silence. There was a network of informants among those around Jody, people who reported back to her on any infractions. The explanation given was the same one that would later echo through Ruby's home. Life must be made so uncomfortable that the sin surfaces on its own. Jessie would say, the details she described in 2023 were, in her words, very familiar. Tape, isolation, forced exposure, the rhetoric of possession and sin. This had been happening 10 years before a girl was found in a closet. Former Connect Science client Stephanie Jones described the mechanics of the program separately. Hildebrandt did not permit dissenting views. Clients were taught that anyone who had not accepted the truth was a drag on their progress, and that such people needed to be distanced. Hildebrandt herself claimed to receive direct messages from God. Jessie put it plainly in her interview, the theories, the methods, the ideas, all of it comes from Jody. Following sentencing, Washington County District Attorney Eric Clark issued his official characterization. Hildebrandt regularly claimed that God communicated with her directly and gave her specific instructions. Ruby accepted her as her leader and followed her directives. This is not an interpretation by investigators. This is the conclusion of the investigation, recorded officially. Letters arrived from Ruby's family. Her brother Beau Griffith, who had himself gone through the Connect Science program, wrote that Ruby had systematically pushed away everyone close to her, first him, then her sisters, then her parents and friends, then her husband, then her own children. Her parents wrote separately. They described their daughter as someone they could no longer recognize. She was delusional. She had been so thoroughly manipulated that we could not recognize her. They asked the judge for leniency and expressed hope that she would one day rebuild her relationship with her children. Ruby's attorneys pointed to the same dynamic from a different angle. Hildebrandt had systematically isolated her from her family over the course of several years. Anyone who might have doubted or challenged what was happening had been cut off. The same mechanism Jessie Hildebrandt had described from her own experience. Eventually, you become the only voice that person trusts. On December 18, 2023, Ruby Franca stood in the courtroom and said, quote, 16. On February 20, 2024, she addressed the court directly. Both women received 4 consecutive sentences of 1 to 15 years each, a total range of 4 to 60 years, the maximum permitted under Utah law. Prosecutor Clark described the conditions in Hildebrandt's home as a concentration camp. Of Hildebrandt herself, he said, minimal remorse, a significant danger to the community. Of Ruby, that she demonstrated a genuine willingness to accept responsibility. One of Ruby's daughters posted a photograph on a restricted platform taken at the scene of her mother's arrest. The caption, "Finally," followed by, "We spent years trying to report this to police and child protective services. I'm glad they finally chose to act." At the sentencing hearing, Ruby addressed Kevin. She said he was the love of her life. She told the children she had wronged them, and she said of the previous 4 years, "I was following guidance that led me into a dark delusion, an elevated version of reality that went unchecked for too long, while I isolated myself from everyone who disagreed with me." While she was saying this in the courtroom, Hildebrandt was already making calls from custody. Recordings of those calls were obtained by investigators and later entered the public record. In one of them, she reads aloud what she describes as a religious blessing, one that, according to her, spoke of the power of her example. She pauses, then says, "I know." The director of the Netflix documentary Evil Influencer, Sky Borgman, who filmed after the sentencing, described what he had learned of her conduct in custody. She was doing from inside what she had done outside. Based on those recordings, he was not wrong. This matters not merely as a detail of Hildebrandt's character, it matters for understanding what happened to Ruby. Because what stood before her was an unbroken woman, someone fully convinced. And that conviction was not a facade. It operated on Ruby, on Jesse, on Connect Science clients, on everyone who came close enough. District Attorney Eric Clark offered his official characterization after sentencing. Not cruelty, not personal pathology. In his words, this is a case of religious extremism. The woman who wrote "I will not feed a demon" did not break in a single moment. She underwent 4 years of methodical radicalization. Every step was called spiritual growth. Every doubt was labeled a sign of distortion. At the end of that path, one frame of reference remained, and within it, a child's suffering was an act of saving them. The court did not accept her words as justification. 4 consecutive sentences, but as an explanation. Does it change what came before? CPS inspectors came in 2020 and found insufficient grounds because they were looking for signs of cruelty, not signs of cult radicalization. A channel with 1 billion views, a confident woman with a camera. All of it was real, and all of it was happening to someone already being destroyed from the inside. This is not a story about a monster. It is a story about how a cult conceals itself inside a family, on a platform, within the systems meant to help, and about the fact that it has no face that is easy to recognize. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.